and start. There we go. Good to see a few faces from last night, and some of you folks have taken my Train Like You Mean It Class 1 before. Tonight I want to talk about everything that's beyond. Train Like You Mean It 1 is a foundation class that I created for teaching at RUM to demonstrate to people a little bit about how to train, how I train. But there's a lot to fighting, a lot more to fighting that I think is worth understanding and worth explaining. And I have never seen anybody teach about this stuff. It was taught to me. My knight taught this stuff. And I teach this stuff because I think it is super critically important. We are in a combat sport. We are in a martial combat sport. There's lots of them. In martial sports, across the whole gamut of everyone. I mean, I've taken Taekwondo. I've studied in Filipino Arnis gyms. I have had a friend who spent his life being an instructor. I've boxed. I've done some grappling. And there's a lot of things about all of that that are the same. So we'll cover that a little bit. So I want to start at a conversation point that is almost never talked about, and I don't know why that is. So as a quick review, here's our study practice spar fight. These are the 4 planks of prowess. This is your meal. You got to get all of these at practice. Getting too much of any one of these at the detriment of another is not useful. Not getting all of these, not useful. That's not to say a lot of practices aren't 90% here and 10% here, or 100% here, or a few people are here, or a bunch of people are here and nobody else understands that they're here in the fight. So let's talk about calibration. What is it? So I thought about this a lot. So calibration at its essential level, and I finally bought a flip chart holder, and I think I recognize most of your names there. This is my contact info. You can always reach me. I was going to go ahead. I did it last night. I would be surprised if most of you don't have it, but I will put my email. In the chat. You can always email me or ask me questions, and if you want my training manual, I'll send it to you. Okay, so I'm going to tip that a little bit. Okay, so calibration is a curve sort of like this. There's the middle, and if we say this is a scale of 1 to 10, when we look at this sort of thing, 1 to 2 is the far left, is ridiculously light. It's not really, you're not really even hitting people. 9 to 10 is ridiculously hard by the common standard. And I say common because if you've traveled around this great big society of ours, calibration, this mean, this center line of your curve, is different in different places. And a zillion years ago, Peter Van Doren did a study at Penzic over 10 years where he had people hitting bowling balls off of sticks and measuring how far they went and asking you to hit really light and overly hard and right in the middle. And they had a way to do it. He had a whole method, and he collected data for a decade, and he published the results. And it was quite interesting that it went like this across a curve that looked just like this, okay? So, what's the definition of calibration? Most people would say, you and I accept, or you and I agree on what's a good blow. That's not true. You and I accept what the other person says is a good blow. It has nothing to do with agreement, because if you and I are fighting, and so we're on a scale here, and I want to throw and take 7s, and you want to throw and take 5s, 1, we're going to probably have a problem. But 2, your choice of calibration is your choice, and no one can tell you to take harder. And part of the problem that we have in a sport that's an honor system, and by and large, 98% of the time, it works great. Rules are made for the 1 or 2% of the knuckleheads that you will find in any martial sport. I mean, I've spent a lifetime in martial arts and visiting gyms and dojos, and the only time I ever got hurt sparring with anybody in Taekwondo was not the black belts. I've sparred lots of black belts. Never got hurt once. Got awful banged up sparring brown belts because they got something to prove. They should be black belts. And their method of proving it is to just beat the hell out of people, which has a detrimental effect on your combat sport. People just leave. They don't have to put up with it, especially smaller, less strong fighters who have not been instructed in how to hit hard. So we accept each other's calibration. And a good friend of mine, who I have known his whole career in the SCA, Sir Gillock, always says, throw thunder and take rain. Hit harder than you need to and take lighter than you need to. Within reason, inside here. If I want to throw and take at 8.95, I'm still in the general norm. If I want to throw 8.95 and take 3, I have met fighters who'll take anything that hits them because they felt they shouldn't have got hit. And that's their way to, they hit like thunderbolts, but they take very mild blows. I don't care what calibration you decide you want to have, but you should have one. I despise, well, you know, it's okay, but I wouldn't take it in crown. That's like you're daring me to hit you harder. Or the very famous, nope. Really? Nope. That's your answer. Okay, hang on a sec. One of the things we banish from our practice is any discussion from the person throwing to the person taking, unless it's egregious. I hit somebody with a blow. Somebody hits me with a blow. I don't ask them what they thought of it. That's not your job is not to tell me whether the blow you threw on me is good. And I've had people get really mad because I've been in a tournament and some guy says, well, you know, what about that blow? Like they barely touched me or they hit me somewhere or it clearly was blocked. And I'm like, I think that's the worst, weakest blow I've ever seen anybody throw. I think you ought to get back to training, dude. Oh my God, you're insulting my honor. Maybe if you learned how to throw a sword blow, I wouldn't have to. And I'm not really insulting your honor. I'm insulting your training, your judgment, your manners. I can find lots of things to insult that are not your honor. Okay? That sounds all ridiculous, but it is in fact largely what happens. So when I hit somebody and they ask me, hey, you know, what about that shot? Hey, I'm not married to it. If it took you that long if you had enough time to ask a question, it wasn't good. Because if it was good, you would have taken it. And it doesn't mean I have to hit anybody harder. Going back to our bodies are moving, swords are moving, shields are moving, 2 swords are moving, pole arms are moving, people are running like hell, rapiers are flying, bucklers are flying. Most of the blows in a fight aren't good. And the first thing you have to disabuse yourself of doing is you gotta stop thinking everything you throw is gold. This is a problem rife with the high echelon of fighters. I can't believe that guy didn't take it. Did you ever consider it wasn't good? It wasn't. And they don't say it to me because I'm wearing a big gold hat on my helmet and a white belt and a pelican medallion and a bunch of other stuff. But the problem, that's a problem in martial sports where the people, not everybody, and not even most, but there's a percentage of people at this sport who think that they are God's gift to fighting. And they're not. They can throw really hard and they can intimidate people in the list. But in terms of fighting skills, most of them are pedestrian at best. And training is salvation. So you can learn to beat these people if you can train it up. And no, you're fine too, Gabriel. You're fine. And so, and did I miss a question? I can't think of many things to insult you other than, oh, Yeah, and again, if you ask me, so how we respect each other in the list is everything about this sport. I fight Diederik all the time. I fight Anya all the time. We have a nice conversational style and we don't ask each other a ton of questions, because if the shot was good, you would have took it. I just assume it wasn't, you know? And it's a lot easier than immediately assuming malice for your opponent. I don't think there are a lot of rhino hides in the SCA. There are some. There are also people just fighting at a much higher calibration of standard than you might be used to based on where you geographically are. So when I go to those places, I turn it up. When I go to the places where they wear a lot less armor, I turn it down. When I talk about teaching people how to hit really hard, I teach a class called Effortless Power Generation for Any Size Frame. And it's focused particularly on small frame people, or especially hitting people isn't nice. We've been raised our whole lives to not want to hit people. That's rude. Yeah, well, that's garbage. Conflict breeds stronger people, and you have to learn to stand up for yourself in the list, or you will get run over by people who want to lawyer you out of a fight. I saw a fight at a Crown that I wasn't marshaling where the fighter died and he was never struck. What? How's that even happen? But I was a combatant in the tournament, and I was sitting on the sidelines, and it's none of my business, and I have no say. I'm not there. I'm not marshaling. I'm not in the armor. So I just say, okay. They're both senior people, and one fighter decides he wants to take a blow from another fighter, even though I don't think he ever got hit. Okay. Calibration. It's a lot more than how hard you hit somebody. And in fact, I don't think it's how hard you hit somebody. I train regularly with some high-end knights who don't want to take any slop. This isn't jungle ball volleyball in your side yard in the summer in shorts and t-shirts. This is sport where I got to lay a weapon on I have to convince you that you have lost. Now, some people just blast with overwhelming force because they can, but overwhelming force that hits my shield is still not good, no matter how much that person wants it to be. And I'm not intimidated, no matter how much that person wants it to be. So when I lay a blow on somebody, this is a Komarism. Only your opponent can tell you you've won. Help them make it an easy decision. I throw a lot of leg wraps. It's like an archaic technique so few people use. I teach it to everybody. And when I've ripped somebody in the back of the leg 3, 4, 5 times, they'll go down. I don't want to hit you. I tell my opponents, you tell me when to stop hitting you, and I'll stop. But if you don't tell me, I'm just going to assume that you're still in the fight. And this leads to finishing fights and not thinking everything you throw is gold while you're standing there admiring your handiwork, which we are all guilty of, including me. I can't believe that guy didn't take it. Whack! I was marshaling a fight, and a young, strong, 25-something kid, just, like a lot of us used to be, I suppose. Although I don't know that I was ever particularly ripped or muscular ever, but very impressed with his own fighting. It's a pool tourney, and into the list walks a lady. She's old enough to be his grandmother, but she's fully armored. She's got a big shield and a sword. And you could see the disrespect as he poof, got stabbed right in the face in 1 second. Fight over. And his whole world collapses because he's dead. He knows he's dead. Everybody there knows he's dead. People who were over in the other list knew he was dead. You're gone, buddy. And he walked by me, and I said, my lord, whose fault was that? Mine. So what are we going to do? Get back to training. Yeah, that's the right answer, okay? So learning to finish a fight is a skill you have to practice. We run a drill called a meat grinder. If you've never done a meat grinder, it's the worst, most hideous, evil drill ever devised, and I am pretty sure that my knight devised it to torture us. But I'll explain it to you because it goes along with calibration. You take all the fighters that you practice. You need at least 4, but you could double rip it. I'll explain it. Fighter number, you line up. The 2 suck positions in a meat grinder are position 1 and position last. Fighter 1 goes out into the pit and kneels down. Fighter 2 jumps in, starts swinging. Fighter 3 counts 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. 7 seconds is average. I've done a 10. It sucks a lot. Extending the time is painful. There is no taking of blows, just calling. So somebody stands over me and gets to bash away. And my goal when I'm in the pit is to land 1 killing blow on that person that they call good. And then at 10 Mississippi, the 3rd fighter yells time and he charges in or she charges in. And then the 4th fighter starts counting 1 Mississippi. And you have to fight everybody in the line on your knees in the pit. And there is no respite. You don't get to retire your opponent. They get 7 or 8 or 10 seconds to strike you. Not excessively hard, but they're just raining blows down on you. They have no fear. They can't be retired from the list. When the last fighter gets to you, and the next fighter, who would have been the 2nd fighter, right, calls time, the 2nd fighter goes into the pit, kneels down. The last 2 fighters go to the end, and you repeat until every person has been in the pit and fought everybody. So the first person fights continuously. If you had 8, 9, 10 opponents, the first person fights for 56 seconds. Doesn't sound real long. And then has to fight 7-second passes with everybody. The person at the end has to fight all of those all-energy 7-second passes and then go into the pit. And those are positions of fame and honor. Nobody, and what we try and do is create an environment where people volunteer to be those positions. And this drill sucks. We do not do it more than every 5 or 6 weeks. We do it in the summer, and it is an endurance, train, push, teach you to keep swinging your weapon, period. Because then, when I'm in a real fight, as you train is how you deliver your fight, I just push through and hit people until they tell me to not hit them anymore. And I don't have to think about it too much. You know, I'm not admiring my handiwork. I've trained it out of myself. And you can train everything out of yourself. You know, we were talking about train out your bad habits. So all of that is deeply around calibration. And then people get mad when you don't take their blows because they're in that gold throw mode, and you just calmly say, my lord, you asked me what I thought. I don't think it's good. It hit piece of my shield, hit my, or I have no explanation. You landed it on my leg. It simply had no force. Well, you can see they'll want to start throwing harder. And honestly, in general, that's good for me. It's good for you. Because as soon as you are doing something to alter your style in response to something I'm doing, you're losing. You want to get wild and brawl? That's my favorite technique. In fact, before I had learned how to even have a B range game, I had an A+ in your shorts fighting technique that got me knighted, essentially. So being calm on the list and understanding what the fight is, these are all kind of in and around calibration. And don't take being threatened. I've had people hit me and I'm like, I'm sorry, it wasn't good. Well, if you're going to make me crank it up, I said, don't threaten me. You don't get to threaten me because your technique is poor. Wow, that makes them mad. Now, Count William can say a lot of things that other fighters might not be, and I can be snotty about it, or I can just say, I'm sorry that you think that, but your shot wasn't good whether you think it was or not. It's up to me. I say if your blow is good. And you got to learn that. That's part of a combat. That's part of a combat sport, you know? And that's one of the less nice parts that nobody ever talks about. and you go to some of these big events. I love Adult Swim. It crushed me to miss it this year. It has become my favorite travel event. I like it better than Penzic. Yeah, that's heresy. I love going to Adult Swim. I see all my friends. I can fight the best fighters. And there are some folks there who are so much better than me that I can't, but I go fight those folks. And there are folks there I don't particularly care to fight. If they ask me for a fight, I would say yes, but I'm not seeking them out. Some of them, it's a stylistic difference. Some of them, it's just not much interest. But while I'm there, I spend a lot of time teaching, and anybody comes up and asks, they get help. Glad you could join us, JC. See you there. Okay, so I think I covered learning to throw and take consistently in your calibration. Put it somewhere. Take in the same place, hit in the same place. And tell people, help your opponents understand. I don't need to have a calibration pass. I find that, we talked about it yesterday. I'm going to throw and take at 8.95. That's where I throw and take. I'll push up to 8.99. If you make me go to 9 or 10 out of context, like in the kingdom I live in, I'm going to say something. But I go other places, and the fight average is 11. And I'm not saying that to pick on anybody. When in Rome, do as the Romans. I go to some places it's 7. And so you just have to understand where you are. But the first thing is, if you can develop your calibration to be nice and consistent, then you don't have problems. I always know, yeah, that was good. I don't have a crown calibration that's different than a tournament calibration. I got one calibration. And speaking of crown is always different because everybody wants the cleanest. The expectation of the upper echelon fighters fighting in crown tourney is they want you to punch their ticket. Okay. How do you do that? Guess what? You train to do it. Really. And so when I go to crown, I expect to not be questioned on mediocre blows that hit me. And I say nothing. When I know a blow is not good, I just keep moving on. And if they hit me with something, if the marshals say, hey, you missed that face thrust, oh, well, that's different. Fine. Sorry about that. But outside of that, crown is just a little different beast. So brings us to what is excessive force. It says when you get hit too hard. Actually not. That is not what excessive force is. Excessive force is a shifting target based on your social area. If we're looking at our curvature of fighting here, excessive force is here or somewhere out where A, you're risking injury in your slice of fighting, okay? Or B, it's damaging your equipment. I have a 12 gauge stainless steel helmet. It's about the heaviest thing I've ever owned, and it has a dimple on it. I hope I took that shot because I don't remember getting hit. So when people talk about excessive force, when's it excessive and when's it a problem? Why is it a problem and when is it a problem? So there are some people in this sport who that's their whole technique. They're going to throw 14s and they're going to blast you out of the fight. In my experience, outside of a few rare individuals who can deliver that kind of stuff successfully, in general, to generate that much power costs a lot on the person. And I've seen an awful lot of people with shoulder injuries, with this kind of stuff. So it can be problematic then. But if you want to slug in, and then you make that choice, I'm going to choose to go fight somebody I know hits really hard. And if I make that choice and I'm prepared for it, it's not a surprise, it's fine. Then it's not excessive anymore because I've weighed into it. When people blast from where you can't be seen, it's especially bad in melees where people hit really, really hard for the only reason thinking that the other side never takes it because they're a bunch of scum-sucking Easterners, Westerners, Mid-Realmers, Northerners, whatever. It's all very stupid. Then it's a problem again, okay? But excessive force has nothing to do with scale. It has everything to do with context, okay? And learning to hit hard, when I say that I teach this, I don't teach people to hit hard. I teach them to be able to hit as hard as they want. And that's a big difference. I can throw 3s and 5s. We can fight to fast touch. you know, or I can generate, I don't know what my limit is. I don't think I've ever had anybody who wanted to go and slug at the big level tell me I hit too lightly. I don't find it fun, and you risk injury when you're pushing that hard, especially if you think you have to throw harder and you don't know how to do it. If you ever want to learn this technique and you see me in an event or something, this isn't a class I can teach over Zoom. It's an all physical, hands-on. But the next Penzic where we have an availability, if you're down in the Middle Kingdom where I live, you come out this way, if you want to spend some time, I teach a lot of people how to hit hard, to be able to dial their fighting power to wherever they want to dial it. Okay. And then being able to adjust your fighting power means that when we go back to study, practice, spark, fight, when we're here or here, we can go hard. And going hard at practice, the reason it's useful is that when you go to a tournament somewhere, all those people who are just slogging around in spar, and you've been doing this and you have this skill, the fight skill, you're going to smoke them or beat them. You know, I don't know that I smoke people. I methodically chop them to pieces. That's kind of my technique. Take your leg, get you on the ground, and just make you regret your life choices over and over and over and over again. A whole lot of people I know, a lot of my night buddies, many of them used to not wear leg armor. They all wear leg armor now because they fight with me. Not because I hit them excessively hard, but I will hit your leg. You can't protect your leg. I don't care how big your shield is. I'll get it. So again, having these skills, this fight skill, it's important. Going hard at practice, doing your very best. If you did your best, that's as good as it gets. And what you try and do is move the goalpost of best. I will be a better fighter tomorrow than I am today. Every practice. And there was a great question that came up on the Facebook live feed last night where a gentleman said, well, if I don't go to tournament and fight the super fighters, how do I gauge how good I am? Okay, so the first part of me says, well, why do I care how good I am? Or why do you care how good you are? Or if you're chasing number one, then it's all failure until you beat number one. And after that, it's what? This is why, and I got this life lesson from my knight. Many years ago, there was a gathering of knights and squires that was a tournament thing put on at Penzic called the Meet and Beat. So I decided I was just going to fight royal peers and see where I was. So I did that. None of them were better than me. I'm sorry, one of them was better than me for sure. But I was in range. There was nobody that got out without getting hit by me, and I won a lot of fights, and I lost a lot of fights. And my knight, at the end of the day, said, well, how'd you do? And I said, right, I beat this guy. I'm as good as any of these guys. And he said, that's your problem, William. You're always judging your accomplishments by what other people are doing. Thanks, boss. You know, you have to get a picture, too. My knight was not big with compliments. I always joke. I remember when he told me, well, son, you don't half suck. Yeah! That means I went from all sucking to only half sucking. That's a 100% improvement.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and Anya knows, Gwyneth knows, you know, and so what I'm chasing is technique. Did I land the leg blow? Was that person able to not get hit in the leg by me? Because if you just chase good technique, wins will come. If winning tournaments is important to you, then you train a tournament mentality, you go win tournaments. But how many tournaments? What's success? I won a tournament. None of that makes any sense to me. I just want to be better. And if I keep working on my technique, if I relentlessly practice better technique, the wins will come. Yeah, and Gwyneth just posted, it's a good segue into victory conditions, which wasn't quite where I was going to go, but I'll mention it. Anytime you're fighting, you have to understand what's the victory condition of the bout. What's the victory condition? So if I'm sparring at Adult Swim, maybe it's teaching, and the goal, the victory conditions about aren't important. Doesn't matter who wins or loses. We're training. If it's Crown Tourney, The victory conditions are very clear. You fall into losers and you're knocked out of the tournament when you lose. Now, some people allow their adrenaline towards winning to exceed their calibration standards in some of these cases. And again, technique is salvation. I'll just keep hitting you. And if I have dented your armor, which I have done on a few occasions, I will stop the fight and say, my lord, that dent wasn't in your armor 5 seconds ago. Now, if you don't want to take that, if you have a reasonable explanation, fine. And it doesn't even have to be reasonable. You can tell me that you think the gravimetric constant of the universe flickered for a moment. Okay, fine. And I'll hit you there again, and I'll hit you there again, and I'll hit you there again. I put a bruise on a gentleman who's a friend of mine because he got a little out of the lane and started hitting me. He hit me so hard, he numbed my right arm. And I was like, okay, if that's how you would like to do it. And through his 18 gauge spring leg, I put a welt on his leg under the armor. And he's like, damn, William. I'm like, I thought that's how we were fighting. You set the rules. I'm just the guy swinging a stick here. Okay. So we got to have some victory condition understanding about what we're trying to do. In Crown, something most people don't realize, unless your kingdom has a really large Crown tournament. Let's see, to be king, I won 9 fights. When was the last time any of you were on the list and didn't get 9 fights? 9 fights. If I had not had to fight all 3 in the final, it would have been 8 fights. Okay. So, if you're in a tournament where it's a bear pit and you get scored X number of points. I once watched a fighter who lost most of his fights win a bear pit because he understood he had to get the most points. And he just whammed through passes. He lost 60% of his fights, but the way they structured the rules, 1 point's a loss and 2 points is a win. He just burned through everybody, won the tourney, understood the victory conditions. We all had a good laugh about it. Then they changed the tournament rules, losses 1, victories 3. Couldn't do that anymore. But for a shining moment, the guy who lost the most fights won the tournament. I think that's fabulous. Okay, so all of that. And don't mistake anything I'm saying here. I love the SCA. This is year 40 for me. 26 is a night. 27, I'm coming into 27 as a night. 26 is a Pelican. I've been authorized since 1983. I love the SCA. I love this sport and I want to make it better. That's why I teach these classes. That's why if we're at an event, if you can find me, come and talk to me, I will help you. I will stop what I'm doing if it's not Crown, and we can train. Okay? So let's talk about a few of the things that, here's another thing that get talked a lot about, and I think it's really important. I call this section Jocks, Misogyny, Ageism, and Bullying on the list. So I spent, from when I moved here to Ohio until the summer between my 9th and 10th grade in high school, being mercilessly bullied. I have been on the wrong side of 4-on-1 and had to be carried to the principal's office to be reprimanded for fighting when I was in a semi-conscious state. My best friend in the world was suspended from fighting after he was rendered unconscious by a cheap shot from somebody in the hallway. And I learned a few things. And I learned that the number one thing is hit them hard as you can. Bullies with bloody noses often back off. Sometimes they don't. Bullying in this sport is most often directed at anybody who doesn't seem to fit the mold of a big, tough fighter. There seem to be some percentage, maybe not a big percentage, of male fighters with extremely poor compensation problems. It's intolerable. It won't be tolerated. It's not tolerated in any practice that I attend. and it's not tolerated by anyone, no matter what rank. It is not tolerated. However, if you are in that category, and this is where a lot of female fighters fall, I am very sad to say. I loved a lot of the things about the 80s. The music was awesome, but I got to tell you, the way women were treated on the list, that shit can go. It can all go, period. You have every much as right to be there, but the problems we see in any society transfer over to any microcosm of the society, which is what we are. So, training is salvation. Skill trumps everything. But if you are in a situation or in a place where you are being pushed out, most people just leave because it's not fun, and I understand that. It's sad because it hurts the sport ultimately. And there does seem to be some thread of people who would love to have this little elite club of fighters. You know, I don't understand it. I want the sport to be bigger. I want to get everybody involved. That's why we do the bear pits at the end of class. We get every person there that we can to get in be part of it, and feel that camaraderie and that joy that is what got me into this sport. I mean, I was 15 years old fighting full-grown adult men who were helping me train. And it was quickly that I figured out that high school held no interest for me and that bullies could just be put down. For a B average, pretty good student, every principal knew my name at my high school. I spent more time in detention than anybody I know. Bad kids spent far less time in detention than me because every time I got pushed, I hit somebody. In sports, it sucks that we have to deal with misogyny at that level. And I'm sure, you know, here I was, I am fortunate to train with some really great women fighters. They're just great fighters. Let's take the word woman out of there. I've been training with Master Anya all of her time in the SCA and a lot of my time. I train with Duchess Alina Beckenham every chance I get. We got a lot of great women fighters out there. And so I've tried to learn how to train women. And it's different than training men, but every student is different. So here I am at Adult Swim, training a royal peer friend of mine. And it was the first time I'd been training all day. And people walking by, and I'm training 5, 6, 7 people, all guys, nothing. I start training a lady fighter, and 5 seconds later, I got some duke who weighs 300 pounds and looks like he's never missed a meal, explaining to me how to train a 5'4" woman. And I'm like, your grace, shove off. Oh, that's the rudest thing. Oh, it's not the rudest thing you've ever heard. You're going to hear a lot ruder. I'm the teacher. Go spectate. This is none of your business. It's a problem. It was the first time I ever really noticed it. It's about 3 years ago. Because by that point, since I was actually teaching a lady fighter friend of mine how to fight and hit people extremely hard, a lot of lady fighters came over to see what was going on, and I was working with a group of women fighters. And I don't even know who these people are. I'm out there, I got a crown, I'm the prince of the Middle Kingdom, and guys are just walking in. I was aghast. I was like, oh my God, I got it. Okay. So finally, I just stepped back and said, look, I yelled, I'm teaching, y'all can just shove off. This is my time. Student needs to hear one voice and it's mine. And that was a watershed moment for me. And I started to realize that's what you ladies have been dealing with your whole time in the SCA for the most part. And I'm really sorry. Additionally, so in with all of that, you have the occasional high school football captain, but I don't know about the rest of you guys. I was playing D&D. I got in the SCA. I was a geek. I was just a complete geek. Proud of it. Still play RPGs. Okay. But also older fighters get this if they want to start fighting later in life. Now, I will say that most of the practices, that's been less of an issue, as a lot of the folks training are older and they're much more sympathetic. So it's not as much of a problem. I've seen it, or the perception that you don't know how to fight or aren't skilled. And that's ridiculous. nobody, everybody says like imposter syndrome. Well, guess what? We're all imposters when we start a new thing. That's the nature of it. You don't know what you're doing. And my goal is to equip people with tools. The best thing my knight ever taught me was how to train myself when he wasn't there. And that's what I want to impart in a lot of this is how do you train? How can you train? And I will always, I love going to Penzic, and I have spent plenty of days when somebody said, hey, will you meet me on the pickup list? Oh, it's during a battle. Sure, I'll meet you. Unless I have some obligation to be at a battle, I'd rather go train. Training's my whole thing. And so I've spent whole days at the training list collecting students, and we all train and we work on this stuff. So the other thing is, there's a simple technique that I learned when I worked in the machine shop and as I moved on through manufacturing. In anything you're doing, it's called the 5 whys. It's a 6 Sigma technique, 5 whys. And when you're asked to do something, okay, it's the 100 Night Challenge. Get a book and go fight 100 knights and have them write in your book. And I have had people get a fight where I don't know what they're doing. They come out, they haven't explained what's going on, and so we're in the crown list at Tournament of Chivalry, and I smoke them. Will you sign my book? What book? Oh, I'm on the Knight's Quest. My first question is, well, why? Oh, because some duke I've never met said it would be a good thing to fight 100 knights. Why? Well, I guess I'm supposed to learn something. Why? The technique is called 5 whys. It's a way to find out what's really going on. And I had a young man who is now a knight, and he's one of my friends. And I exasperated him. I said, I'll tell you what, I will sign your book. But what I want you to do is go talk to my friend, Mistress Gwyneth, who had did this thing called the MK1K, which was the Middle Kingdom 1,000 bouts in rapier. And I believe the first person to do it, smoked it in 4 months. And then we didn't see him for 2 years. And here was my friend, Mr. Gwyneth, just working her way along. And she finished it where she got something out of the process. So, hang on.
Finish. Sorry. Yeah.
And so I sent this fighter to talk to her about what you get out of these things. The 100 push-up challenge. Well, you get healthier. Really? What if I have a bad shoulder? I can't do push-ups. You get a million fights. Well, you will get better at some level, but if you don't have a reason and a focus and understanding of what the process is supposed to do for you, in my book, it's kind of dumb. I'll give you 60 seconds.
Okay. So the purpose of the 1,000 bout challenge for me was to expand my horizons, expand my social network within the rapier community, and increase my skill set. And it really didn't matter who I was fighting. I always learned at least one thing. And so you would do 10 your set was 10 passes per person per day, and then you accumulated that over time. So in the course of a year, I had 1,000 bouts. I took a lot of notes. I learned a lot of things. And at the end of it, I was a considerably better fencer than I was a year prior to that. And again, it didn't matter who I was fighting. I didn't go out and seek all scarves or there were no mods yet, but all scarves or all Cavnots or anyone from other kingdoms. So that was basically, it was a very important personal goal setting opportunity for me, so that was my experience in the 1,000 bout challenge.
Yep. So I sent the fighter to talk to Gwyneth, and they chatted for a while. And then he came back and he said, okay, I'm doing this because I think it's going to help me get knighted. There's an answer. Now you got a reason. And okay, and I'll sign your book. But I talked about this yesterday, only got so many minutes on earth. Time is an ever-fading commodity. And I'm not wasting it from somebody I don't know telling me I should do a thing that's somehow supposed to mystically make me better when I know better. I got this. And I didn't come up with this, by the way. This roughly setup was from a guy named Wolfsagen von Ostensee, who lives out in Antire. And I refined it, but this guy introduced me to this idea, and it's like, oh my God. For a guy I spent one weekend with 20 years ago, he had a huge impact on what I think about training. I want to pop through a few comments real quick. Over-explaining to newbies. Put your newbies in armor, make sure they're with somebody safe, explain to them, look, above the knees, everything else is game, no hitting with hilts, no hitting with shields, and let them throw blows, because the new fighter will shed all their misunderstandings about fighting in a roughly 3 minutes. Everything they think about, that'll all be gone in about 3 minutes. Then you can teach them. I don't teach anybody the first time out in armor in the sense, look, here's what you do. Here's kind of how you throw a blow. Keep your shield up. Can't hit below the knees or below, and let them go. Vast amounts of explanation to fighters at that level is useless. It just confuses them. And guess what? Not everybody who's trying to teach you can teach. There's lots of people who can't. And if they tell you they can't teach, believe them and move on. Precious minutes of your life running out. I got to go find somebody who, okay, I know. And people are going, oh, let me show, I'm the greatest teacher ever. Oh my God. The more I learn, the less I know. Seriously. I do all of this to try and build better, to be better. Okay? Light bulb moments. Hopefully, in the process of training, you will have light bulb moments where suddenly you'll go, that's what he was talking about. I can't explain my light bulb moment to you and have it make any sense. And where you see this a lot in the over-explaining and the teaching that is, in my opinion, detrimental to a lot of fighters is the senior fighters that never got knighted. Unless they have a really strong sense of self, and some of them probably should have got knighted, and they're way past when they're really effective, but they're bitter about it. And it is simply a way of this process. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So don't let anybody bury your newbies in info that may or may not be useful. Get them fighting. Get them swinging the stick and help them, okay? I want to just demonstrate a few quick body mechanics before I get on to talking about, I mean, these are just things that I think you should know and understand. One of the things that I still see people doing, and I cannot for the life of me understand, I see it in heavy weapons, I see it in rapier, I see it in professional martial arts where people who are paying for what is supposed to be professional instruction. You can't really see my feet, but there is a concept in fighting about where your strike is. So I'm showing it to you on the camera. It comes out from your sternum and it goes straight forward. And wherever your body is pointed, that's your prime strike. And I still see fighters who turn their shoulder in. And if you could see my foot, I'm showing you the side of my knee and my toe is pointing over there. And I'm guarding like this or like this. The back of my head is exposed. You know, it's this guard. This guard's okay. But when I change my stance, look what happens. And even if I move my shield, I'm going to get hit there. By the simplest shot in the book, the flat snap, bang! Remember all the dents in the helmet? I wrote a whole section about this and the mechanics of stances. Some people call it a pie wedge, where your feet on the ground, and I have some diagrams in my book about this. What did I tell fighters they are allowed to say, thank you for your help. My brain is full now. Good point. And I say that when I go and train with some of these super fighters, I have said, okay, I'm done. I got to go process. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour. I can absorb more than a lot, but then I walk away, and it might be 6 months before I've processed that information. Getting your brain over full is not helpful. It really isn't, because then you end up learning bad habits. You got to unlearn them. But okay. So my feet, if you could see them, are like this, and my opponent is in my wedge. Probably almost everybody has seen the terrifically, awesomely bad, excellent B martial arts movie that made Jean-Claude Van Damme a big star, where he goes to fight at the Kumite, this martial arts tournament that may or may not actually be real. And he is portraying this guy, Frank Dukes, who was the first non-Asian to win it. Frank Dukes wrote a book all about it that really can't be confirmed, but this guy was real, Frank Dukes. And I watched a special where he did the coin trick for real. He said, you know, it's a backwards triangle. You're a gun turret. And anybody who gets on the side of my gun turret, I am in danger. As long as I can, you can literally, in a fight, control your position by simply keeping the gun sight on your opponent with your feet straight or slightly out. You don't want your toes in because then you're pushing on the side of your knee or exposing it. So many people don't get this. And you can do it from any stance. I can use this is how I fight, with my kind of boxing stance. Use a center grip shield. I can do that. I can rest my sword on my shoulder, old school. I can still do it just like this, but I am lined into my opponent. And as soon as you do something where you throw across or do something without moving your feet, you're going to get hit. Always move your feet. Set, throw, set, throw, set, throw, set, throw. Move your feet. Pel work, throw a blow, reset, move your feet, move your feet, move your feet, move your feet. Okay. I heard a really good line that resonated with what happens in fights. Conor McGregor, who rose to big prominence in the UFC, when he was training fighters, he kept saying, don't give up position for submission. So you're in a fight. Imagine you're in this MMA fight, and you're in a good position, but you suddenly decide you want to go for that submission. You want to end this fight. You want to choke out your opponent. And 8 times out of 10, they reverse you. You're on the ground, and you get rendered unconscious. In the SCA, people throw crazy shots for no reason in a fight, giving up their good position. You know, this is a little bit, as a better analogy to what most people might recognize is, Anakin, I have the high ground. Okay, the high ground isn't really a thing, but Anakin is safe on his little sled on the lava, and he has all 4 limbs still attached to his body. But he wants to kill Obi-Wan so bad, and Obi-Wan is just standing there. So Anakin makes the stretch. Instead of just stepping onto the ground and coming up the hill, he decides he's going to leap through the air, and it all goes very badly. 5 seconds later, he's got no legs, and he's missing 1 arm. And 10 seconds after that, he's on fire. Okay? When you're in a good spot in a fight, remember all that doing all your cardio, own the spot. Somebody's bombing shots on me, whatever. I'm in a good spot. As soon as I force something that is not there in the idea that either something will open up or I will beat my opponent to the punch, you are going to get clobbered. And it is so prevalent in fighting. Take care, Antonio. This whole class in the next half hour will all be on the Middle Kingdom's Rum YouTube channel in the next few days. Or it'll be in Duke Bronis's Coach's Corner as well. Have a good night. So when you're in a fight, grind it out if you have to. A little bit of patience goes a long way. And most of the top flight fighters wait for the lesser fighter to make a mistake, and then they just clobber them. And not even clobber. I watched a fight at Crown where a fighter tried to force a position, and the fighter standing his ground pushed his sword back and stepped away as the other person threw their face on it. There was utterly no reason to charge. There was even less reason to charge leading with your face. But they were in this high guard, and they lunged forward, and they literally skewered themselves on the thrusting tip, dead center of the face. Fight over. What are you doing? Why would you do that? Hey, it's Crown. Yeah, sorry. The reason I had such a good view is I was marshaling that Crown. It was miserably hot. And part of that may have been people not feeling like they hadn't done enough cardio, their battery is draining, and then they force the fight. Not very good. Okay. A couple of notes I wanted to just cover on general preparation. So When I go to crown, I take 12 swords, 2 shields, 2 helmets, an extra set of body armor, extra set of legs. And as I was getting my weapons inspected, one of the marshals said to me, "Worried about breaking a sword?" No, I'm not worried about breaking a sword. I only had to fight 9 fights and I had 12 swords. I had 2 sets of gauntlets. I had an extra helmet. I mean, and why would you do that? So part of this, if you want to succeed at tournament fighting, is quieting all the little voices that tell you you're going to lose. You're gonna have some failure. So I can't fix everything, but what I could do is I could quiet if I have a gallery of 20 voices, I could quiet 18 of them. The voice that's telling you, "Oh, you're gonna bust that favorite sword." And I did. I had a sword that took me to the finals of crown that I saved until the next crown, and it exploded during warm-ups. Put me off my feet a little bit. I had to spare a couple of swords, but it was like, there's no magic swords, there's no magic gear, there's just gear. And if you have enough of it, then you don't worry about it. And you take those little voices out of your equation to help you go do the thing that you're trying to get to, which is the fight. Physical is cardio builds confidence. Big gas tank, I'll take over anything. I don't care how much weight I lift. Cardio before a big tournament, and it just helps you a lot. Mental tricks, they're not tricks if they work for you. Triggering words that help you get fired. One of my squires would always we would hit van braces. At the crown tourney I won, I went and knelt before my lady and she kissed me on the helmet and she's like, "Go kick this guy's ass." "Yes, ma'am." I'm sorry, you got to go. That's the end of it. The lady of the house just told me that I got to retire you. It works. Those kind of things, the very famous Yogi Berra quote, 50% of this game is 90% mental. It's my all-time favorite quote for that kind of stuff. And of course, most people who've engaged in any martial arts, this saying's been around a long, long time, but Georges St. Pierre, who was very successful, he was the most successful middleweight in the history, a welterweight in the history of the UFC. The more you sweat in the gym, the less you bleed in the ring. We don't bleed in our sport, but the analogy is perfect. Yep. Yeah, I spent some time training Duke Finn for his 3rd crown, which surprised me because he won 2 crowns without my help. But he said, "Well, you won't take any of my shit." You're right about that. He's one of my best friends. I stood as his ladies champion and I was best man at his wedding. So when we created the wall of squires, he would sit behind the wall of squires with his Walkman on and listening to Wagner and reading a book of 5 rings. And people would come and say, "Well, I got to talk to you." No, you don't get to talk. Are you the king? "Well, no, I'm not." "Okay, well, then you don't get to talk to him. The only person who gets to disturb him is the crown." And he won that tournament. Not much because of my training, but more because I made sure that he was in the best place to win the tournament. And it was a team of us, but I led that team to say, we got to give this person everything we can give them so that all they have to do is pick up a sword and shield and beat someone into the floor. And in the finals, in the first fight, I said, "Look, this guy's faster than you. You got to run him down." So I ran him down and beat him. Beautiful. Perfect. One more of those. We're done. Go pop the champagne bottles. Second fight, didn't run him down. Got smoked. Came back to this corner. All the fights were sword and shield. And he looked at me and I said, "Do I have to say anything?" "No, you don't have to say anything." "Well, then run this guy to ground and let's go pop the champagne bottles. Come on." And he went and won the tourney, and that was that. But when you don't do those things for yourself, when you don't have a team, you got to do some of them for you. Make sure you got your gear in good repair. Make sure you got a spare this or that. It really helps me focus. I don't have anything to worry about. I've seen people take a 1 sword to crown and it's brooming on them. Think that person's going to win crown? Probably not. Okay. All right. So there's an excellent, and I think it's been videoed. I do have a write-up of it. My good friend Sir Gunnar Redboard taught a class called The Victorious Mind. And it's about believing you can win and how your mentality affects the outcomes of your fights. And if you'd like it, I can send it along as well. It's a really good read, but you have to believe. And training and preparation equals success in this game. They equal success in virtually everything, but in the sport where you have to go and physically deliver something, preparation is a big part of it. Physical, mental, spiritual, whatever you got to do. Got to wear your lucky knee pad. Need that lady's favor. You know, got to stop at McDonald's and eat 2 sausage McMuffins because that's what you do. I've seen that one backfire, just saying. But, you know, whatever helps you get there is what you need to be doing all the time. When I go to fight practice, I got my Monster Ultra. I got a couple of power bars. I got a drive of an hour, relax. You know, when I'm at Crown, I don't watch a lot of fights because I get into the fight and it mentally fatigues me. My knight would stand at the list looking at his next opponent. He'd study him, he'd have a plan, and then he'd go in and execute it. Didn't always work, but when he just got serious, he won the 2 crowns he entered. And there were some grinder, rough slog fights in those things. But he would watch his opponent. What works for you? Is sitting with a Walkman listening to Wagner your thing? Then do that thing. Is watching Looney Tunes streamed off of YouTube your thing? Do that thing. You know, I'm a social person, so I'll socialize, but I watch a lot of fighting because I get into it and I get mentally fatigued, not physically fatigued. Okay. So I wanted to reserve a last chunk of time to talk about peerage. And for the folks who haven't heard peerage is a process, and it is not hard to fulfill the requirements to earn a peerage in the SCA. It's hard to fulfill the requirements consistently over a long enough time that enough people in the order you're trying to get into counsel the Crown to say, wow, we think that person should be in here, and a Crown that's not gun shy about elevating people. Most people get frustrated in a real short period of time. I've never once sat in a Shiv meeting where anybody said that guy's too old to join the order. Never, not once. Never even really heard anybody say they were too young to join the order. I think Kellick was 23, among the youngest knights in our kingdom's history of the modern era. One of my students, now Baron Angus von Atzinger, was 54. He's still getting better. One of my favorite people to train with. I've been training with him for 15 years. So that process, you know, and at the end of the day, the only person who counts in the process is the Crown. And I got to tell you, I've had people say, I had a young lady who is one of my distant students out west that I got to get out there to see her at some point when we can travel. She said, well, somebody came up to an event at me and said, I'll never get knighted. Oh, that means you're doing something right. You know, there's a few peers here. How many of you have been told you were never going to get your peerage? Yeah, fine. Is it the king telling you? No. Piss off. Well, thank you very much for your opinion, meaningless as it is. And you know, some people will stand in a show in a meeting of some sort where people stand these things and yell and scream about a person in a negative manner. If somebody doesn't decide, never in all the time that I was shift secretary, which was through most of the 90s into the mid 2000s, only one person ever got knighted with all elevates and no drops and a bunch of weights. So for the folks uninitiated with how it's done in the Middle Kingdom, there's a pole. It's got names on it. And the peers say, elevate, weight, drop, and another person. And there's a lower list and an upper list, the watch list and the vote list. There's no voting. There's no voting. But you have to get enough people to check that first box for the crown to have a consideration. Now, some crowns want, there are 125 active pelicans in the Middle Kingdom right now, I think. Something like that. It's ridiculous. It's astonishing. I mean, when I got pelican, there was about 12. I got elevated, I think I was told on 9 elevate votes out of the 12 votes, out of the 12 ballots that were returned, or something like that. But that process, especially if you're looking for a martial peerage, involves traveling and getting to know the members of this order that you want to counsel the crown. And in the Middle Kingdom, only the peerages poll. Our grant level orders do not. We don't do that. And I just can't even imagine what that is like. So you have to join that community of people so that they know who you are. And if there are big tournaments or big events, especially events that offer some opportunity for pickup fighting, like maybe there's a large tournament that whittles the fighters at a big rate. So mid-day, there's a lot of people who are out of the tournament. Big pool tourneys, Candlemas is our kingdom's really big tournament. Or events like Valentine's Day Massacre in February, which has a lot of space for other fighting. Festival of Maidens. There's some of these events where you go. I think I've fought in the tournament at Festival of Maidens. I've been going since I went to my first Festival of Maidens in 1990, and I think I've missed 1 or 2. And I think I've fought in that tournament 5 times. I roll out there, I see all my western part of the Middle Kingdom friends and students, and those that aren't, we all grab, we find ourselves an empty list or go outside in January, depends on the weather, and we train. We start working. You know, sometimes I can collect a few other shiv who aren't doing the tournament. One time, Sir Fern and I, we had 40 people. People, as soon as they got out of the list, were coming over to spend some training time with us. And Sir Fern's another person I like to train with. She's the first Lady Knight of the Middle Kingdom, and she also is a lifetime Aikido student. She's very accomplished, super smart, one of my favorite people to train with. So, you know, you got to go through the process. I'm not saying the process is good or bad. As peerage orders get larger, it typically gets slower. So if you want to shine, if you want to pull out from the pack, the first thing you have to do is figure out who your peer group is and train with those folks and drive up your level, you know, and then start standing out and start, you know, travel is required. You will never get a peerage sitting in your local group, no matter how much you do. I won't say no matter. A crown may be minded to elevate someone, and that is the crown's prerogative, and I support the crown's prerogative to do so. And I've been the crown. Duke Gabriel's on here. He's been the crown. You know, that's the crown's prerogative. When we elevated peers, we took responsibility for them for the rest of our lives, and we viewed it as we are making a peer that is a gift to the kingdom, which was taught to me by Duchess Garlanda, who I was her champion when she was queen the second time. And that's how we viewed it. We aren't making peers to make ourselves better. We're making peers to make the kingdom better, to get peers out into these places and to recognize people who long deserved it. And we got a lot of flack for it because we made a lot of peers. And we don't care. My wife and I don't care. Whenever anybody talks about it, it's like, oh, thank you. Well, I don't mean it as a compliment. Well, I don't care what you think. Because people need to be recognized. And some of the kingdoms are still really big. Our kingdom used to be 36 hours east-west, 34 hours north to south. I know Duke Gabriel is laughing at me, which is okay, because Australia is one kingdom and it's a huge place. And even still, the East Kingdom, if you're in Jersey, which is down around the very southern part of it, my good friend, Count Ionis and his lady had to drive 12 hours up to Bangor, Maine to fight in a crown. And all of Quebec is part of their kingdom. And if you're royalty, you got to go these places. So, you know, So when I have to drive 4 or 5 hours for Crown, I think that's a blessing, because I've driven 16 hours for a Crown, and I've driven 19 hours to an event once. So as you go through these processes, what I will always come back to is training is salvation. Everything that I've gotten out of this, I train. If I was deficient, figure out what you're deficient in, develop a routine, train it up. Get rid of that deficiency, move on to the next deficiency, because there's always a deficiency. Always, always, always. It's a lifetime pursuit. I'm 55. I think I'll still be Crown competitive for 10 more years, barring injury. Everything on me is still original equipment. Not always sure that's a plus, but I know that most of the folks who've ever had surgery on a major joint, it was never as good as it was. Now, they may have been in legit pain. They may have had a legit injury, I know. And it's not, Anya knows I love her and that we're going to keep training. Training may have to change a little, but we can do that. Guess what? Training isn't fixed. Need to make an adjustment, correct, train. It's not that hard. So I think tonight I'm going to stop. I think that I've pretty well covered everything I really wanted to talk about, but a lot of these are the tough questions, and they are very real in sport. You are going to run into knuckleheads, but training is salvation. I just train to make sure, and I teach people how to handle those situations and how to work on skills that'll get you there. It's just a process that we must go through as we go down that road. And the feature of being older is far more understanding. I find that the older, while the younger students absorb fast, they don't have any context. I teach older students, more advanced students, they've got the context. So when I explain something, I explain it one time and they're hitting me with it 5 seconds later. That's cool. You know, so it's not all doom and gloom as you proceed through any of these passes. And I strongly recommend wearing good armor to avoid any unnecessary injury, and, you know, learn to take care of your body. The more cardio you do, the better shape you're in. A friend, a Duke, I know, healthiest guy I'd ever met, you know, 5% body fat, Mr. Six-pack abs. He had a heart attack. Couldn't believe it. His cholesterol was 600, didn't know it. Just hit that genetic lottery. Doctor said that 30 or 40 years of fighting had built up so many extra blood vessels on his heart that he kind of breezed through it, and he had to make some life changes, but he's still out there fighting at an incredibly high level. So it's doable. It's as much as you want or as much as you can do. And I'm here to tell you that I am here to help you train as much as you wish to. Y'all know where to find me. I'll be on the list. Probably fighting pickups or teaching. Come on over. We can always find time to work. And my goal for my next Penzic, unless I'm Crown, is to spend more time at the pickup list, more time on the list fields. I mean, I've fought melees since I was first in the SC. I think I can sit 1 or 2 out. Love me my bridge battle. I'm not going to miss the bridge battle. That's my favorite battle of all. And field. But I might take a battle, and if you want to catch up with Penzic and you're there, love to see it. We can train. So I'm gonna take Q&A. Last night Q&A ran until almost 10, but I'll answer questions as best I can for as long as you wish to. So you can unmute your mics if you have questions. You can flip your cameras on if you want. And if there's any questions I can ask, you can ask, I can answer. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
I don't have a question as much as a comment. Going back to training new fighters, something I do is getting them an armor as quick as possible. Helmet, sword, shield, and then I use the boffer sword like you have. That way, they don't learn by the owl method. They have a chance to kind of learn a little bit of technique and learn all the things not to do before they start getting hit with a hard stick.
Yeah, and again, I really recommend a Div 2 boffer. I Master Eric Dorgax, munitions grade arms. He carries the 3/4 inch sanded rattan. This is just a pool noodle. I don't even use glue. The real trick I've discovered is slather it with Dawn dish soap, fit it up in there. Got to have 2 inches of no wood. That Dawn dish soap will seal into the foam, and it'll never come out. And then just take an extra piece and do the same thing for your back handle. And yeah, you can do helmets and shields and no armor and train. And I always have these so that if folks want to train and don't have armor for some reason, we can just go train. Great point, Diederik. And Diederik and I train together all the time. He's one of my favorite people to train with. He's got a lot of good skills, a lot of great experience. Doesn't fight like me, which is also really useful. We fight.
I like to snipe you from range because I don't want you to get near me.
And I got to close the gap or I'm going to get poked in the face.
Okay, I admit I like to get close with you too, because I used to fight that exact same style for the longest time. But
yeah,
I try to mix it up.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to when training resumes.
Oh, you and me both.
I'm ready for it. But if anybody else has any questions, I've seen Ronan and Grimmer have attended some of my other calls. And of course, Duke Gabriel, we had a chance to spend a whole night into the wee hours of the morning, nearly freezing to death at the coldest Gulf Wars in history out in the yard with wooden shields and swords, talking about training. If there are any questions you got, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I actually have a question real quick. The page that's behind you, the very top of it is kind of whitewashed out. Can you, the very top,
Planks of prowess.
the one at what's above it?
Bullying cannot be tolerated.
Okay, thank you. The way the light's hitting it, I'm like,
yeah, one of these days I'm going to figure out a better way to do this, but hopefully very soon I'll be able to just do it in person. So yeah, that's bullying will not be tolerated, cannot be tolerated. It'll
Thank
destroy
you.
your practice really fast.
I have a comment as a non-fighter, but somebody who William knows got put in armor, got a helmet on, got to throw some blows.
Yep.
Laid the one and only blow on William I'll ever lay. And I wasn't mentally in a really good place to continue on. And I realized that there was only so much time and focus and energy, and I had too much respect for the game. But what I did get out of it, which was invaluable to me, was I got it. I understood how much fun it is. And I understood mentally that, these people wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't fun, but I got it in my heart. So if you have somebody who comes around and they pick it up and it just doesn't end up being the thing for them, don't think of it as wasted time. Think of it as you've taught somebody a little bit about the thing that you love, that you've given them an appreciation that they might not have had before.
Good point. I remember that. And that's, for those who don't know, that's Mistress Alexis McAllister of Beverly. She's a Pell Laurel and a court baroness, and she helped me. I would not have probably got knighted without all her help. Same with Mistress Smith. I mean, I didn't get here by myself for sure. And
Nobody
spending
gets
some
anywhere
time around fighting, cooperate and graduate, spending some time around the fighting list, even as a non-combatant, for you lords and ladies who may have a significant other who may or may not be fighting, can be useful. I was at a tournament somewhere. I was at a Crown, and a bunch of 20-something young snotty guys were standing watching a fight, and my lady was watching me fight, and they were all like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Well, the first thing is, it might be worth noting I'm wearing a white belt. Could be important. And they're spouting off about whoever I was going to fight was going to stomp a mud hole in me. Who was I? Some has-been knight who they didn't even know who I was. And my wife just looked at him and said, actually, in about 5 seconds, he's going to charge forward. He's going to rip him off in the leg. He's going to hit him about 3 times in the back of the thigh. And while they're going down, he's just going to beat their head in.
And
5
then you
seconds later, that's what happened. Because she's seen me fight. She spent so much time hanging around lists. So, you know, it is a community, and it's a good community, and you don't have, and there are plenty of fighters not fighting anymore, and you can still be part of that camaraderie. It's okay, you know. That's one thing. And what I tell is that there's a feature that I call belongingness. That is what the SCA experience is really good at delivering. You can find your tribe. Most of the SCA is probably your tribe. But inside of the SCA, there are tribes and tribes. Your tribe is probably here somewhere. And you can find that group and be part of it and be welcome. And let me tell you, for all the people I ever met who said, oh, you know, when I get off, when I get knighted, versus the person that actually offed, the worst fighter I've ever seen who actually passed the off. Guess what? You're in the club. You did it. Maybe we had to find the new definition of minimum, but it doesn't matter, because after that, you got your fighter's card, you're in the club. And there is still some pissy behavior, and there will always be some strutting peacocks who think they're better than everybody. And let me tell you, my strategy is training. And then you just drop those guys like a bad habit. And it's even better if I can teach that person that they may be snickering at how to do it. That's very rewarding. And I'm probably a bad person, but hey, I don't really care in that sense. I just don't think any of that has any place in any sport. And I have some great fighters I like to train with. Are they all that skilled? Compared to what? They can fight. They can hit hard enough to make me take a blow. That's good to go. And I think as a community, we just need to adopt more feelings and thought processes like that. And again, that's why I spend time in youth lists. Let me tell you, if you want to make somebody's day, any adult heavy weapons fighter, go to Penzic, drop down to the youth list, spend an afternoon, or they'll do their Tuesday night thing and train with the kids. Go to Val Day in the Middle Kingdom, Valentine's Day Massacre. It's usually the Saturday closest to the 14th in February. And they run a youth TOC, a youth tournament of chivalry. I get more out of that than just about anything else I do. Spend the whole afternoon training with those kids. It's really something. It's a good experience. And you can include them in your, if you got youth fighters at your practice, by some of the things that I talk about here, you can include them as long as you modulate. You know, again, I got young fighters carrying a couple of Boffer polearms or a couple of Boffer swords. And all the heavy fighters, it's like, they're kids. Here's how we're going to do this. You're going to get on your knees and you're going to fight them left-handed. And they groan, and either they get out of the pool or they acquiesce. And it's like, what are you afraid of? It's just a kid. So when I was king, I went to Baron Wars, which is a big melee event we have every summer. It's a lot of fun. It's hosted here in Ohio. But I went down to spend some time at the youth list, and there was a little girl. I think she was 7. She was the youngest age to be Division I. So I went out there left-handed with my little, and that's Division I Boffer weapons don't have rattan in them. So when we train with the adults, we want to div 2 weapons so you've got some rigidity, you know. So I get this, you know, you're fighting with a pool noodle doesn't have any rigidity. And so I'm on my knees and I'm the king, and she comes over and she just charged on me and stabbed me a bunch of times, and I fell over. And she was like, oh, I beat the king. I'm the queen now. And everybody looked aghast like, oh my God, you can't say that. It's like, she's 7. She can be the queen. She can come up and sit with us in court. You know, it doesn't cost you anything as a community, as a fighter, to be gracious. Nobody's gonna mistake her for the queen of the Middle Kingdom. Okay, she doesn't have the fancy dragon and cornet. Okay, you know, people know who the king and queen are. If that gets under your skin, you need to really rethink how you go through these things. I lose lots of fights, but when it comes to tournaments or crown, I am in it to win it. And when I practice hard with my practice partners, we go all out at the end of practice until nobody can lift a sword. We fight to the absolute limit of our abilities, or as close as we can get. Diederik knows how hard we go at the end of the night, so that you can say, because the last thing you want, what all this really boils down to is you're delivering your training. I don't want to have a good day or a bad day. If I trained X, I want to deliver X. If X doesn't get it done, guess what? We go back and we train some more, right? Any given Sunday mentality is not a way to win the Super Bowl, okay? You got to get on task. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to just shut this off. So, so that's a big thing, is delivering your training so that you can, again, pick up fights hard. We fight all out. I always tell people, I never took a lot of stock in winning tournaments. I think I've won 4 in the entire time I've been in the SCA. I finished strong. A lot of times I just don't care that much. But one of those was Crown. Get focused on task, go win a Crown tourney for my lady. Done. That was important. That got me that extra 10%. When you go to a tournament of chivalry in our kingdom, and a guy says, well, I want your A game. Is that my Tuesday, just worked 10 hours, had to drive an hour to this practice on 5 hours of sleep A game? Or is it my 8 hours well rested, prepped, 2 hours of cardio for 2 weeks A game? Those are different things. Let's see. Yeah, Diederik, in 23 years, I've only seen one Crown that approached that any given Sunday case. Yeah, it's not to say it can't happen, but if that's what you're banking on, I'd rather bank on training. I really would. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a percentages person. So I do everything I can. That one. Now, if you want to win Candlemas, or you want to go, most kingdoms have some premier tournament. You want to go to Beltane's or Emerald Joust or Mudthaw. There's all these big tournaments. All the guys I know who go after those tournaments, they train for them, just like they're going to a Crown, except they train for whatever the rules are, because those tournaments have rules that are different than Crown tournament. You want to win Candlemas, it's a pool tournament. It typically draws 120 fighters. And Count Ulrich, one of my training partners, says the best prepared fighter usually wins. That's the truth. You can spot in a Crown through the first round of a tourney who's there likely to win and who's not. And I will say, I had a lady tell me once that being asked to be fought for in Crown was the greatest honor of her life. The Lord who fought for didn't win. He did pretty well, but she didn't care. Just being fought for was a huge honor. Somebody thought well enough of her to fight for her, or him, or whoever you're fighting for. It's a big deal. And I think that if I'm going to fight for my lady in Crown, I ought to put the effort in to go try and make, at the very least, a good showing. But at the best of it, win that thing out. Any other questions? We got time. My time is your time. We've all been in lockdown. I haven't been in fight practice in 3 months, 4 months. Duke Gabriel keeps posting pictures of his fight practice down in Lockock, and I'm so envious. But good on you. Good on you for being able to get that stuff squared away. Questions? Anything else? Jump ball, any topic.
What was your most challenging fight? The thing that really took you to beyond what you thought you were capable?
So it's a coin flip. The first one is this one you'd expect. We had a gathering event where we had about 150 fighters, about 25 or 30 shiv. And it was supposed to be a little intimate practice between me, my squires, and a knight and his squires to mutually help our squires get better. And it got out in the public, and a whole ton of people showed up who weren't really there to deliver the kind of fights we were looking for to make the improvement. And the friend of mine said, here's what we're going to be doing. And, you know, if you want some instruction and yada. And then said, and you're the co-host, William. So what do you think? And I said, I am here for your very best fight. If you aren't here to give it to me, step aside, because I'm just going to beat you to the dirt. So you could see every fighter tighten up in their harness. And this thing started at 1 o'clock and it went till 8 o'clock. And by 5 o'clock is the only night left in armor. And I had a line of guys, 20 plus, and every one of them wanted to kick my ass because I'd been a pretty arrogant. That's pretty, not a lot of hubris there, or a lot of hubris there. And so so I fought every one of them. I couldn't feel large portions of my body. I got hit way more than I should have. And the very last fighter was a young, strong guy who didn't know it. He was going to, we already knew the king was going to be putting him on vigil the next weekend, but he was still under the impression that he wasn't going to get knighted anytime soon. Strong and fast, hits like a ton of bricks. And I can't even hold up my shield, but I ran my mouth, so I guess you got to go pay the piper. So I went out there and he tattooed me badly. And he ripped my leg, and I was so tired, I overlifted my shield. And I showed him a right-hander. I showed him something that looked like this. And this is before I wore my coat of plates. This was my plastic sport armor, which will keep you from being injured, but you feel all the hurt. And he ripped a body wrap into me that flexed the plates on my plastic body armor. It was the most sharp, painful thing I've ever felt in a scoff fight. And I blew all the air out of me. And right before I hit the floor, it was so painful, I got a huge endorphin rush. And I launched up off the ground, great shot! And then I stomped him, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, oh my God, this is bullshit. Yeah, you get. And it was like, that fight is in there, training, you know, all that kind of stuff. Came back, and but really, the fight that advanced me the most as a fighter is not a great story. It's real quick. Great friend of mine, Duke Thorbjorn Osis Franson, asked me to come to an event in the north part of the kingdom. He was going to come down from Eldamere to help him train some of his squires, who were all guys I knew real well. But Os was a big two-stick fighter. He barely knew which end of the shield to hold using sword and shield. Kind of like how I fight two-stick. I get this thing. Yeah, whatever. So I said, sure. So we go to the event, spend all day. I don't do any of them. It's a big melee event. We don't do any of that. We sit under this tree and I fight. I work with all his squires, and it's 100 degrees out. It is so hot. And he's been sitting in the shade, drinking beer, drinking water, and I'm working his squires. And his squires are a bunch of runaway rejects from the circus. They're all big and strong gorillas. And I'm pretty beat. I'm beat. And he said, come on, let's get some. And I said, man, I got nothing for you. I'm beat out. I'll catch you the next time. He drove away from that event and was killed in a car accident going home. And I can't take that back. Shameful. I can't ever fix that. I don't have very many regrets in life. I pride myself on not regretting life, and I regret that deeply. And so, if it is 10 at night after court and my wet armor is in the trunk of my car and you say, hey, William, I want some fights, you got it. I don't care if I just stand there and let you hit me. That changed my whole outlook on fighting, because I can't ever get those fights. So if anybody wants some fights, under whatever circumstance it is, you got them. I'm going to give them. I don't care if I get my ass kicked. That adjusted my whole view of this sport. So I go to Adult Swim, and I'm on the list for 4 straight hours without a break of any kind to fight everybody who wants to fight. And then I drink some water and I go back out to the list. And I'm there until they're tearing it down. And then the next day I stay for Sundays and fight from 10 until 2 till they shut down. And if you want to fight, you get a fight. That experience really, really changed how I view fighting overall.
Cool, thank you.
We have one person that has their hand up to comment.
Oh,
Freddie
Freddie.
and Eldimer.
Okay, sure. But I'm sorry, I didn't see the little icon. Great.
That's okay, I can wait patiently. What do you look for in a sword and what do you look for in your gambeson? Specific to you, because I've done lots of research on how to make gambesons, but like what makes it actually functional for you?
Great questions. So start with the gambeson. It's got to be custom fit or close. Everybody's body. So like, I don't know if you could tell. I'm going to stand up straight with my shoulders. One of my shoulders is very slightly lower than the other. A tailored piece of clothing can take that into account. An off-the-rack piece of clothing cannot. I like that the gambeson has the pads sewn in. I don't have to wear pads that are squeezing. We've all worn the old school, they're not old school, the modern pad. But anything that's in that elbow is going to bind a little, so that I love that the wrist ties open. The weight of it is good. This is made by Armor Moskva, Quilted Armor, Natalia Yefimova. She's magic, all custom. Ties instead of toggles, because toggles under your armor, not going to be good. Fitted through the side, but yet total range of motion. This is another one. This is like, I could wear this to work. I could wear this for 12 or 16 hours a day, and I have. When you're king of Penzig, you put your armor on at 8 and you take it off at 6 or 8. So, and a book that you might like to look up in your research, one thing I've heard, it's about $35 US. It's called The Coat Simple is the name of the book, COTE. And folks I know who've made a coat, an arming coat like this with that, really loved it. My Squire Finnegan O'Flynn taught himself to sew in that book to make his gambeson. And so The Coat Simple is really a good resource to look at, where it talks all about this kind of fitting, all this interior fitting here. In a sword, let me just grab one of mine. Can't see my giant weapons rack out of view. So everybody should learn to custom make their own sword. There are many swords. This one is mine.
Mm-hmm.
I like a carved grip. When you hold your hand, if you just take your hand, too many people leave the grip round, even if they make it small. But when you close your hand, it is narrower at the bottom. That's why sword tang. Yeah, and Diedrich says made of linen. Linen and wool batting is the way to go. And astonishingly, it doesn't get hot. I can't explain the physics of that. But your grip should taper. Lots of people pick up my swords and they go, wow. And I'm like, it's not that hard. I take about 20 minutes. Actually, I can make a group of swords, but if I wanted to just make one sword, the process would be 15 to 20 minutes. I tape my grips with athletic cloth tape. I don't like it to be sticky because you don't want the sword to not be able to turn in your hand. You don't want it stuck to your glove. I know some people use like tack tape, and I don't care for it. I always shave the sides. I want my sword to look like a sword. It looks like a club, but it's a sword. And I weigh all of my rattan. When I cut a rattan pole, so this is something maybe you know, maybe you don't. A 9-foot rattan pole will be heavier at the end by the ground. Lighter at the end farthest from the ground. So I cut them in thirds and I weigh them and I say, these are the lights, these are the mediums, these are the heavies. Heavy sword goes on a light hilt, light sword goes on a heavy hilt. If you put a light stick on a light hilt, you're going to have a hard time getting people to take blows because it's just hard to transfer. This is something I call the popcorn rule. Arnold Schwarzenegger is way bigger and stronger than me, and he and I can each throw a piece of popcorn exactly the same distance because a piece of popcorn cannot be strength advantage. If we were throwing anvils, he can probably throw it further than me. So there's a diminishing return on weapons. You make them too light. And while I don't necessarily ascribe to the sword tip just about touching the ground, all my swords are 34 inches long, and it's taken me a lifetime to figure out 34 inches is the perfect sword. I do have some 36s for crown if I have to fight 2-weapon fighters. I have a little bit longer sword. I don't kin much to putting counterweights on swords and balance points because I think the sword is so light. You know, historically, the sword weighed about 2.5 pounds or less. This sword weighs 2.3 pounds. I always use a basket hilt to protect my hands because I make my living with my hands. Bar hilts look cool, but I have had rattan pieces come through the bar hilt. I took an injury that peeled all the skin on my third finger like a glove. And I didn't know it because I was wearing a glove. And then people started screaming when there was a pool of blood on the floor that was running out of the end of my glove. So I cleaned it up, put a bandage on it, and went back to fighting. Got it cleaned up and took care of when I got home. But so it's a little bit of time and experiment, but I like a covering hilt. The plastic hilts, a lot of people like the Balder hilts. I've had bad luck breaking them, but they're easy, they're convenient. One thing is they don't rust and they don't mildew, they don't mold. Lots of people like them. I think they're too light. I got to use a heavy stick with a plastic hilt. This is an aluminum hilt. You can find these from, I buy almost all my hilts from Bocalo Armory, Bokalo. Master Eric, Munition Grade Arms, carries hilts like this that protect your hand fully. A few other good armories, North Star, Windrose. You can find these kind of hilts. I just like a fully covered hilt because if I smash up my hands, I can't work because I type on a keyboard all day for a living. And I like thrusting tip. It's a tool. It's not the be all end all of fighting, but you should have one on your sword. Learn how to use it. It's useful. It's not 34 plus the thrusting tip. It's 30. I'm sorry, you're right, Diederik. It's 34 plus the thrusting tip. The piece of rattan is 34 inches long, and the distance, because I now custom make all my thrusting tips because Diederik told me to do that after I had a bunch of swords bounced to ground, and I do it. I took a piece of rattan that I put on a foam sheet. I cut 3 little biscuits. I glue them together, mount them on the sword so that they cover. So this is probably 34 and a half, 34 and 3/4 when it's all said and done. You can also, if you look at a piece of rattan you've cut and you see lots and lots of holes, this was from the longer end of the rattan because as the rattan grows, you get more airspace, which is why it's lighter. Did I answer your question, Freddie?
Yes, thank you so much.
Mostly I make swords and I adjust them and I keep working on them. This one's really comfortable and I can make a sword. What I actually use to make the swords and do the sides is a flap wheel, 36 grit, 4.5 inch disc on an angle grinder. You just got to be careful because it removes the rattan really fast. But you can, what I do is I cut all my pieces to length. I level the sides and I use a caliper to measure the thickness. And then I come back, I put the hilt on, mark it, take the hilt back off, and then I grind out the grip and I just keep putting my hand on the grip until it's comfy. And all my swords have a screw that holds the hilt on right here. Goes into the wood. The way I do it, because you don't want your hilt coming off. And if you break a single tang and you're using clips or tape, your sword is useless. I can keep fighting for a little bit, even if the tang up here breaks off. And if it breaks off down here, the bottom one, but what you do is you drill a hole into the rattan that's just about the same size as the screw you're going to use. You use a wood screw. You take some toothpicks, you dip them in Elmer's wood glue. Actually, what I use is Type Bond 3 waterproof wood glue. You stick them in the hole and you screw the screw in down over it, and that glue and the material of the toothpicks means this screw will stay put. It won't vibrate out. Yet you can still take a screwdriver and unscrew it when I want to move this hilt off of this stick. I believe that if you're, one of the things I have seen a lot in fighting is people spend the least amount of time on the one thing. I can suffer a bad shield or lousy armor or an uncomfortable helmet. But if the thing you're trying to hit somebody with doesn't work, you're done. You got no chance. So I I've spent a lot of time kind of figuring this out for me. And of course, as your height, so I am 5 foot. I used to be 5'9". Now I'm 5'8.5". But at 5'9", 5'8.5", 34-inch sword with a thrusting tip. That's my length weapon. And I like them a little tip heavy, so when I'm throwing, I can drive that tip. And then the weight lets you easily recover or out back as you drive that sword in.
I want to add
Any
to
other
that, William.
questions?
Add to the sword thing. I have tried up to 4 feet. I've tried as short as 30 inches. I've tried 36 inches. I have done everything in between. And 34 seems to really, with the thrusting tip, seems to be the magic length that gives the perfect balance between speed and power, and just, it's the perfect balance.
And how tall are you, Diederik?
I'm 6'3".
So Diederik's quite a bit taller than I am, and we're both using the same length sword. Duke Finn once tried to teach range fighting by, he made a 52-inch long single sword. His idea was you can't infight with it, and I proved that you could infight with it. But he was trying to teach it, and it's like, you got to find a sword that's comfortable for you, because the other thing is as you increase the length of a weapon and the weight, if you aren't executing really good technique, when you go forward, you're going to strain your shoulder. Especially, my pet peeve of training is when I see guys throwing wraps where their arm goes way out here like this. You're going to hurt yourself. You should be doing deltoid exercises to get those strong, but when I throw a wrap, it's almost a straight movement over the top, and then you just roll the blade over. You make a big arc. In our practice, that means my best friend Colin O'Flannery rips your arm off, and you get to wear the black armband of shame.
Flam him.
Yeah, we actually call it getting flammed because he's looking, and he's wearing a ton of armor. I hit him in the head and he rips off my arm. That's a poor trade. So 34 is, and if from a good position, 34 is not a bad place to start, because also the shorter you make a weapon, I've seen people come out with a 28-inch sword, and you're like, well, 26-inch sword. You only got one fight there. You have to come in. I teach that style, and I'm good at that style, but I like to have the option. This idea that a longer sword somehow makes it so you can't infight is false. I can infight with a 42-inch sword. It's just training. But when you cut down, if you have more length to your... What was that?
Sorry, my cat jumped onto me in a very silly way. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. But you can always use less sword than you have. You can't add sword in the middle of a fight. So I spent a lot of time with a lot of folks who I felt were using too short of swords, and said, let's move up and get to a length where you're at least not at a disadvantage with most fighters, And there are, of course, we got some gangly mutants roaming around these here parts who, can 6'8" and can scratch their knees without bending over. That's a talent. That's when you need an infight, because I've found a lot of those fighters struggle when you press them up, because they're not used to being pressed. They can flat snap a lot of fighters before they get in, and you get in on them and they don't really have a great plan. They don't know what to do. I want to learn to fight everywhere. I want to be accessible to all areas of the fight, the A range, the B range, the C range, all of it. So the 34-inch stick is a pretty good place to start with a sword. Well, it is 5 to 10. So, Yep. 30 is 31 plus tip, so 32. How long is your thrusting tip? Okay. Still, though, that's not excessively short. You're not miles off from where we are. Because again, it also has to work for your frame, as you have, and this is also a thing that a lot of people don't think about. People make jokes. So I made a joke about somebody with really long arms. That's an advantage. I also have some folks who have Night, Dietrich. I'll see you soon, buddy. I also have trained some folks who had short arms. And you laugh, and people laugh because, oh, they'll go like a little fire plug. Yeah. However, people with short arms have an advantage in a fight, is that the amount of time it takes them to do that is faster than me, because their arm only has a short distance to travel. And if they get in on you, there's short position shots that they can kick your ass with, and you have a really hard time defending them, because as the distance closes, their hand speed is faster because they just don't have to move anything as far. Small people, small frame fighters are not, people want to say, well, you know, this is a big guy sport. I think Sir Semyanka from Calontir, formerly of the Middle Kingdom, he begged to differ with you, and I'd put him in a fight. I'd put him up against anybody. And he's 5 foot, even 4'8", 5'2".
He's shorter than Francis.
He uses 40-inch swords. Trained it that way. We called him Death from Below.
Yep.
And I've had the pleasure of having my ass kicked by him more than a few times. He helped me in my early training a lot. Great guy. But, you know, big is not a technique. Little is not a technique. Fast is not a technique. Those aren't techniques. Some people want them to be techniques, but they are not. They're just attributes of your physicality. And so the goal is always to customize your style to maximize what you are good at, you know? So that's how I approach training. I'm always trying to adjust people's training to make sure that how they're executing is optimum for their frame, for their mentality, for their availability of training, for the gear that they like. Always match it to the student.
Count William, Alex had a question in the chat.
Okay.
I was just about to get there.
Oh.
It says, do you prefer to watch a pace or spin bowler?
Ooh, if it's oldies of Shane Warren, his spin bowling never gets old, but I really love pace bowlers like Mitchell Stark, or he's about to retire, James, oh my gosh, James Faulkner is one of the bowlers I really like. But I probably overall, I'd say I probably lean to the spin just a little bit. Somebody could throw a good flipper. We're talking cricket.
Yep.
That's great. I really miss that I haven't been able to see Gabs Estanzi for a while. Yes, Your Grace. So I'll tell you what I will do, since we are friends on Facebook. I will get the link. It's in there is a YouTube Middle Kingdom Rum channel, Royal University of the Mid-Realm. So I will, I'll post it. I think I'm friended to most everybody here. If not, I'll try and throw it out there somewhere, or email me, and I'll make sure that I have a, good night, Freddie. I'll get that link up. Plus also, Bronis is supposed to be sending me the link to his Coach's Corner. So all the classes I've taught are online at this point. Rum has been storing them all. So, all right, it's 10 o'clock Eastern. It's probably earlier for most everybody, but at least it's 10 o'clock for a lot of us. I thank you all for joining my class. I hope that you got something out of it. And I'm looking forward to when we can get together and teach with all our gear, and I can get out and see everybody.